Hello everyone, welcome to Meat, Fish, Poultry Process Technology lecture series. My name is Shiv Prasad. I'm an assistant professor at Department of Food Technology, Vignan's Foundation for Science, Technology and Research. So in our today's lecture, we will be having a discussion on one of the important concepts, that is processing of meat as well as meat product. So the content that we would be exclusively concentrating in this particular concept would be the purpose of meat processing and what are the basic processes that are involved in the meat processing. Okay, so these are the two important things that we would be concentrating in our today's lecture. So to begin with, let us have an understanding on what are the important purpose of the meat processing. So as we are already aware, so the processing of meat can be to extend the shelf life of the product, and also it can be to a value addition. So the primary purpose of any of the meat processing would be the addition of different ingredients to meat to improve its taste as well as flavor. So whenever we are adding anything extra to the meat as well as meat product, so in turn we are adding a value to it. So that means it can be, the value can be an addition in terms of the palatability characteristics such as like taste as well as flavor, and the value can be in terms of extending the shelf life, thereby checking on the growth of the microorganism. Okay, so that is the primary purpose of meat processing. So to improve the palatability characteristics towards taste as well as flavor. Okay, so the second important purpose includes the specific processing condition as well as ingredients to improve the shelf life of the meat as well as meat product. Okay, so we have already studied what are the different types of processing techniques which are in place or employed to in turn extend the shelf life of the meat as well as meat product. So wherein we have also studied about the different chemical agents which are recognized as safe, generally recognized as safe, can be exclusively added to the meat as well as meat product. So whenever such kind of processing condition or such kind of chemicals are added to the meat as well as meat product, we are in turn improving the shelf life of the meat as well as meat product. So that is another added advantage or the purpose of meat processing. So the third important purpose of meat processing includes the products of specific requirement can be prepared. So there is certain exclusivity as far as the product is concerned. So the product for the children, it can be for the obese people, and it can also be the geriatric people or old age people. So in case of obese people, they require a fat product, they require a food product which are having a reduced fat content. So a special category of the food has to be prepared for such kind of people. So similarly, in case of children also, they require a protein rich food for which in turn helps them to for their growth as well as development. So we will have to create an exclusive product to meet the nutritional requirement of children, geriatric people as well as other category of people such as like obese people or the people who are extremely thin. Okay, so depending on that, we will have to prepare the product. So the another purpose of meat processing would be to prepare an exclusive product to meet the demands of the various category of the consumer. Okay, so the next important would be to processing adds value to the meat as well as meat product. So irrespective of what kind of processing techniques that you're implementing and also what kind of ingredients that you're adding. So whenever we are implementing such kind of a thing, it means that we are adding a value to the meat as well as meat product. So that is another purpose of meat processing. Okay, so the processing improves the demand as well as marketability of meat as well as meat product. So whenever we are adding any kind of an ingredient which in turn enhances the palatability characteristic of the meat as well as the meat product, so that means that we are improving on the demand, that is the consumer demand as well as the marketability of the meat as well as meat product. So that is of utmost importance and it goes hand in hand. So if the palatability characteristic of the product is good, then the market demand as well as the consumer demand for such kind of a product will be extremely high. Okay, so if the palatability characteristics is low, instantaneously the consumer demand and the market value of the product will eventually decrease. Okay, so these are the important purpose of the meat processing. So besides that, the processing of the meat will also improve on the employable opportunities, because whenever we are producing any kind of a meat as well as meat product in a larger scale, it means that it requires a exclusive manpower. So it is also creating employment. So these are the important purposes of meat processing or food processing in general. Okay, so let us now have an understanding on what are the basic processing procedures which are involved in the processing of the meat as well as meat product. So the first important one, comminution. So what exactly do we understand by the term comminution? So the term comminution refers to the subdivision or reduction of raw meat into pieces or particles. So if we are subjecting any kind of a raw meat into smaller pieces or processing wherein we will be reducing its particle size, it means that we are subjecting the meat for comminution. Okay, so that is nothing but the comminution, which is the subdivision or reduction of the raw meat into small pieces or particles. So this subdivision, depending on what kind of product that we are actually preparing. Okay, so in case of the sausages, it requires that the meat has to be completely grounded into smaller particles. Okay, so depending on what kind of product it is, what is the requirement, we will be subjecting it for comminution. Okay, so the degree of comminution or particle size depends upon the type of the processing of the product. So what kind of the product that is desired at the end of the day, considering that as a factor, we will be subjecting for the comminution and the degree accordingly. Okay, so meat may be coarsely comminuted or finely grounded. It is often unique characteristic of the product particular. So as I've already told you, in case of the sausage, meat sausage, what is desired is it has to be completely grounded. Okay, so the meat has to be completely grounded. So that is the requirement. So considering what kind of product that we are intending to prepare, so we will have to subject the meat product for comminution. Okay. So comminution improves uniformity of the product and increases the tenderness by reducing the particle size. Once the particle size of the meat is reduced, so the tenderness of the meat is ultimately increased. So these are the important points that has to be taken into consideration whenever we are talking about comminution of meat as well as meat product. Okay. So meat grinder or meat mincer or meat slicer are exclusively used for comminution process. So how exactly it can be comminuted? Okay, so for sausage type product, grinders are usually employed as the first step in case of comminution. Okay, so the meat grinders are exclusively used. Herein I have shown you a picture where the large chunk of meat is added and then in turn we would be getting a minced meat, or it can be grinded meat. Okay, so such kind of product is exclusively desired. For that we will have to use an exclusive machinery. In case of the comminution, specifically for the sausage purpose, we will be using meat grinders. Okay, so the grinders are exclusively used for this particular purpose. So this was about the comminution. Okay, so the next important processing step is the emulsification of animal fat. So how exactly the emulsification actually happens? So let us understand this particular process by defining what exactly emulsion is. Okay, so emulsion can be defined as the mixture of two immiscible liquid of which one is dispersed in the form of a smaller droplets or globules in another liquid. So that is the exclusive definition of emulsion as far as the meat product is considered. Okay, so the liquid that forms the smaller droplet is called as dispersed phase, and the liquid in which the droplets are dispersed is called as the continuous phase. Okay, so in the next slide I have given you an overview of how exactly the fat in case of the animal fat is actually dispersed. Okay, so the size of the droplets ranges anywhere between 1 to 5 micrometers. So that would be the size of the water droplet that is existing. Okay, so in case of this particular picture where I have shown you how exactly in a product such as like the sausage, the meat fat exists. So this is exclusive for the sausage. Okay, so in case of here the fat is existing in the dispersed phase. Okay, and water isn't existing in the continuous phase. That means the fat is existing in the form of a smaller droplet which is dispersed in water. Okay, as you can clearly see in here, so this is the fat globule. which is dispersed in water. Okay, so the solubilized protein such as like the myosin as well as collagen protein. So these are the protein components as far as meat is considered. So they are associated with the fat as well as water. Okay, so in case of sausage, the fat is in the dispersed phase. That means the fat is in its smaller water droplets, droplets, and it is dispersed in the continuous phase of water. Okay, and the solubilized proteins such as like myosin as well as collagen are helping or in associated with the fat as well as water. Okay, so the fat which is associated with the myosin as well as collagen protein and is dispersed in the continuous phase of water. Okay, so that is how the animal fat is existing in case of sausages. Okay, so this was an example to make you understand how effectively this sausage actually exists and the phases of emulsification. So the next important process is the meat extension. So whenever we are talking about meat extension, so the one thing that we have to be aware is that the meat processing actually involves a lot of non-meat items as well. So if we want to process a particular meat into a different product, so it generally involves the use of lot of non-meat food items. So these non-meat food items are generally recognized or termed as extenders. Okay, so let us try to understand what extension means and how exactly this is going to have an impact on the quality of the product and also the palatability characteristic of the meat product. Okay, so as we are already aware, a lot of non-meat food items can be incorporated in case of meat products. So these are generally termed as extenders. So they are also known as fillers, binders, emulsifiers, or the stabilizers. So these are the important extenders that are exclusively used in case of meat as well as meat industry for the preparation of different meat products. Okay, to reduce the cost of formulation, several products such as like the soy protein, potato starch, and the flour of wheat, chickpea, rice flour, etc. can be added. So they are improving the palatability characteristic as well as the overall quality of the meat as well as meat product. Okay, so they are called as extenders. Okay, so similarly, if you want to have a stable emulsion that is maintained, then we will have to go for a suitable kind of an extender as well. So the several gums such as like the sodium alginate, carrageenan, gum arabica, so they are the stabilizers. So it may be used to stabilize the fragile emulsion. To maintain a perfect emulsion of in any kind of a product, then we will have to use a stabilizer which will maintain the environment in a stable condition. So they can be such as like the sodium alginate, carrageenan, as well as gum arabica. So depending on what kind of product that the meat industry is producing, so we will have to choose a suitable extender for the same, which in turn improves the product quality, stability, and then overall product palatability characteristic. Okay, so that was about the meat extension and what kind of meat extenders can actually be used for the processing of meat as well as meat product. Okay, so next type of process is the pre-blending operation. So what exactly we understand by the term pre-blending? So as we are already aware, blending means it is mixing of two or more ingredients. Okay, so it refers to mixing of part or all the curing ingredients such as like salt, nitrate, nitrite, etc. with ground meat in a specific proportion. Okay, so it means that we are mixing the ground meat with a specific proportion of ingredients such as like the salt, nitrate, as well as nitrite. Okay, so it can be performed at a domestic level and also on an industrial scale. So in an industrial scale, in a domestic, we have such kind of pre-blenders. So this is a domestic pre-blender, while this is an industrial scale pre-blender. So the major important thing that has to be noted in here is it is exclusively for mixing of the ground meat with specific portion of salt or any other kind of ingredients, so that we can have a uniform mixing of the products. Okay, so the next important thing is the hot processing. Okay, so what exactly do we understand by the term hot processing? Okay, so hot processing refers to processing of the carcass as soon as possible after the slaughtering without undergoing any kind of a chilling process. Okay, so this processing should happen within a period of 1 to 2 hours. So that means after the animal has been slaughtered and then it has been properly eviscerated, then if we are cooking the product within that specific period of time of 1 to 2 hours without subjecting it for chilling, then that is called as hot processing. So this is widely practiced in case of India. Okay, so in India, soon after the slaughtering of an animal, we subject it for cooking purpose. Okay, so this is one of the important things. So this is going to have an impact on the overall characteristic of the meat as well as meat product. Okay, so this technique has several advantages. So what are the advantages? Let's have an insight on the same. So the primary advantage includes that it accelerates the processing step and entire processing time is reduced by a greater extent. So as soon as the animal is slaughtered, it will be skinned, the evisceration will happen, and then immediately it will be subjected for cooking. So the time lagging is not observed in case of hot processing. Okay, so animal is culled and then it is prepared into a beautiful dish. So that is one thing that has to be taken into consideration, as it is an added advantage. Okay, so second one is there is an improvement in the cooking yield as well as the sensory characteristic of the meat as well as meat product. So if we are keeping the meat product for a longer duration of time, so there are a lot of problems that we actually come into face to face. So what is the problem? So there may be loss of moisture. So loss of moisture means the tenderness as well as the overall palatability characteristic of the juiciness of the meat is lost. Okay, so we will have to compromise a lot whenever we are keeping the meat for a longer period of time. So by subjecting it for hot processing, what we are doing, so the cooking yield of the product will eventually improve, and also the sensory characteristic of the meat will also eventually improve. Okay, so this is also an advantage of hot processing, okay, or hot processing or hot cooking. So there is a financial benefit due to reduced chilling space and labor requirement. So there is a lot of energy that is going to be saved because the chilling is not taken into consideration, because as soon as the animal is culled, it is subjected for processing. So the labor requirement is eventually decreased. Okay, so the capital that has to be invested in case of hot processing will be extremely less, because after the animal is culled, the product is instantaneously prepared. Okay, so that was about the hot processing and its advantage over the conventional type. Okay, so next one we have the cooking or heat processing. Okay, so as the name itself suggests, it is cooking. So that means like higher temperature is eventually desired in such kind of a process. Okay, so whenever we are talking about cooking, cooking not only improves the eating quality of the meat as well as meat product, but also provides a variety of meat products. By cooking, you can actually manufacture a numerous variety of cooking meat dishes. Okay, so it generally do not improve the keeping quality such as like the juiciness or the tenderness, but it will also help you to prepare a variety of different cuisines as well. Okay, so what are the different effects of cooking on the palatability characteristic or characteristic of meat as well as meat product? Okay, so the first thing we have, meat protein is coagulated and denatured by the cooking. So as we are already aware, so the denaturation of protein is nothing but the unwinding of the 3D structure of the protein. So that is going to happen whenever we are subjecting the meat for cooking purpose. Okay, so the second important change that is observed is meat palatability is improved. That means the overall tenderness as well as the juiciness of the meat as well as meat product is eventually improved, and thereby the flavor characteristic of the meat is also improved. Okay, so that is another important change that is happening. Okay, so the storage life of the meat product is generally increased. So how exactly we can justify this statement? Because meat itself generally harbor a lot of microorganism. Okay, so a variety or numerous variety of microorganism can be actually present in case of meat, in the raw meat. Okay, by subjecting it for cooking, so since we are providing high temperature treatment, so there is always the reduction in the number of microbial population. So in turn, the shelf life of the product is eventually improved. So that is another effect of cooking of meat product. Okay, so the texture as well as the tenderness of the meat is also eventually increased by subjecting the meat for cooking. So these are the important advantages of subjecting or having a meat product to be cooked. All right, so that was about the cooking. So whenever we are talking about cooking, so there are cooking of meat can be done in a different variety or different type. Okay, so herein I have established a table or different types, which gives you an idea about what are the different kinds of cooking that are actually in practice. Okay, so the cooking of meat can be distinctively classified into 3 distinct variety. That is, the first one is dry heat, moist heat, as well as microwave heating. Okay, so in case of dry heat we have roasting, which is nothing but where hot air oven is used, and the temperature that is exclusively used in case of roasting is 115 to 150 degrees centigrade, which is the highest temperature. And next one is broiling. Okay, so in case of broiling, so the meat cuts are supported by a grill. So the meat will be supported by a grill, and it will be eventually grilled. Okay, so that is nothing but broiling. So whenever we are talking about frying, we have 2 distinct types, shallow frying as well as deep frying. So in case of shallow pan frying, only a limited quantity of oil is added onto a pan and then the meat is fried. So in case of deep frying, so the entire chunk of meat or a portion of meat has to be immersed in a boiling oil so that it can be improved on the frying characteristic. Okay, so next one we have the moist heat. So whenever we are talking about moist heat, we have stewing. So in case of stewing, it is exclusively for the preparation of gravy. So solid food ingredients plus liquid, it will result in the formation of gravy. So that is nothing but stewing. So next one we have braising. So it utilizes both dry heat as well as moist heat. Okay, so next one we have pressure cooking. So in case of pressure cooking, as we are already aware, so the temperature that will be very, very high. Okay, so thereby the reduced or the time that is taken for cooking will be eventually reduced. So the pressure is created. Because of pressure, there will be a greater increment in the temperature, and thereby the amount of time that is taken for the proper cooking will be eventually decreasing. Okay, so similarly we have simmering. So in case of simmering, the meat plus water, which is boiled at a temperature of 170 to 160 degree centigrade. So that is nothing but simmering. So similarly we have another radiation technique, that is microwave heating. So in case of microwave heating, we will be using a microwave of anywhere between 950 to 2450 megahertz. Okay, so that is the intensity of the microwave that is exclusively used for the processing of meat as well as meat product. So this was the overview of what kind of cooking of the meat techniques can be employed for the preparation of meat as well as meat product. So these are the basic cooking operations which are employed for the preparation of any variety of meat as well as meat product. I hope this class of various operation of meat as well as meat processing is effectively understood by each and every one of you. Thank you very much, guys.